Sheila.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Okay.
So fun.
Welcome, 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 everyone who's joining us now. Thank you for joining us. And each of us can introduce ourselves a little bit in the beginning before we start talking on this favorite subject of ours, which is actually the subject of flow, of how we actually got connected the first time, which was how do you flow like a woman?
Yes.
So, Lila, why don't you give a quick introduction of how you came into flow and what's your life background?
Yes, thank you, Iris. So we know each other from our training with PNCC, and I don't remember what it stands for, but you probably do. Hi, Maya. Um, and hello.
Can you
Can
hear
you hear
me?
me? Yes. But
Yes.
we seem to have little interruptions. So I have been following Stephen Kotler with PNCC for a while, and for maybe 3 years. And when my life kind of slowed down, I decided that I was really interested in this methodology and what is flow. And I joined the program for coaches to learn the neuroscience behind coaching and also launch a business. Coaching flow or helping people get into flow on demand, which was really appealing to me, as well as the science behind it. And that's where we met.
Awesome. And just a very quick kind of synthesis of your background, because I know you've been in some pretty cool data jobs as well. You've been in the world of information technology, which I imagine has been a very male corporate like world.
Yes. So I joined IT very early on as a help desk agent. And information technology or technology in general fascinates me. So even though the field is heavily male dominated, I think it's a creative field, and I think that there's a lot of room for women and girls to enter it. Um, but yeah, I was a project manager for various technologies for about 20 years. And after that, I left corporate and owned my own business. I owned a paint and sip studio for 5 years. And then, unfortunately, because of COVID, I had to close that down and went into corporate again and try to sell technology now because I knew what it was like to implement it and make it work. But then I was curious to see, well, what is it like to sell the value of it? And I did that for about 2 years, and then I got laid off. And that's where the room to enter, to go into coaching training opened up for me. So that
Yeah.
brings us here. And I know that you wanted me to mention that, yes, I did sell cybersecurity technology, but, you
I just
know,
thought that's so cool.
it is cool. It's a really important and newish
Yeah.
um, edge of technology. I think it's not new, of course, but it's developing quickly. And so the technology is also developing quickly for it.
Yeah, that's
So what
amazing.
about you, Iris? Tell us
Yeah. Well, I had
what,
I guess, a similar journey. What brought me to coaching really was also, yeah, I worked over 20 years in the corporate world as a communications executive for various international corporations. And I also directed a public relations agency. So I was always in communications. And then I just completely burned out after 20 years. And with that burnout was also like an awakening call to understand, I guess, what was missing. I thought I was doing everything right. And that's what slowly brought me into the world of coaching as I started working on my inner healing and my emotional intelligence and just bringing more understanding to what makes me happy truly. So this has really been like a quest for me to learn how to live a good life, and that has brought me to learning a lot of different, traits about the human behavior and human consciousness. And I got very deep into understanding human consciousness and emotional intelligence. And as I also did a certification in emotional freedom technique and tapping, which is a therapeutic tool. And then there was this other piece, like once I created some space in my body, in my life, and I felt more at ease, I felt more clarity, I kind of was in a good space. And then the question came, what do I create now? How do I live? How do I, how do I perform? And every time I would think of work and how I could do things, create a project or launch my own business, I always get this, feeling, this resistance, this fear in my body, because the memory that I have of how you do things was of a very corporate 9 to 5er, high pressured, very male, energy. And I really wanted to learn how to be in a different energy. And then I encountered the work of Stephen Kotler, and the peak performance neuroscience certification came up, this very high level training in high performance. And it just spoke to me on so many levels. I was really drawn to it. It did also feel very male. But then I thought, okay, we have male and female energy within us. And that energy in me has always been pretty strong. Like I've always been a doer and a creator in the world, and I wanted to make things happen. So I was drawn to it, and it was fascinating, a huge body of knowledge in the flow neuroscience. I really didn't know flow was such a well-studied field. I thought flow is just something that happens when you have a good time and you feel good. So I was fascinated with the idea that you could actually bring flow into work. So work can actually be fun and productive. And so I was drawn to this possibility of learning a whole new way of working, a whole new way of bringing things into the world. And then when we connected together, there was this question that popped up in both of us, and I think many women in the program as well, that, well, how do you flow like a woman? Because everything just feels very, very similar to our corporate resistance, our corporate experience, which many of us burned out from. And so that brought us together in this journey for many months in conversations about how do you flow like a woman? What are things that are different for women that can bring us into high flow, into high productivity that looks different for men?
Yes. And so you bring up an excellent point, which is flowing on demand in order to be highly productive. And flow is this really well studied, even though in everyday language, we just think of it as being in the zone, right? It's a really well studied neurological or biological state, this chemistry that happens in our brain. So yeah, that's really interesting. And Stephen himself has said that to him, even though it's a question, right? Like, how do you flow like a woman? To him personally, and Stephen and Rian are our coaches, and the creators of the program that we went through, it wasn't an interesting question. So we're kind of left to our own devices to adapt and figure it out, right?
Yeah, in many ways, yeah. Even though, according to all of the studies so far, because we posed this question several times to Stephen, to Rian, to John, our coach, and so far it seems like the research is not really showing much of a biological difference. But but it seems like that's more in the perspective of what is the neurochemistry and the chemical, the biology of what flow looks like in the body. And that will look the same, I guess, for men and women, meaning the chemicals that are produced in a flow state, at least the five that are well known, the
Like
dopamine.
dopamine or norepinephrine, right? We have it regardless of men or women. Yeah.
Right. So to that degree, yes, flow will look the same for men and women. I think the question for us was more like, well, we're learning how to bring flow from the pros, from the athletes, from the super duper, bionic people to the everyday people. And
Yeah.
that's what I was interested in flow. I'm like, I don't
Yes.
know if I want to be, on extreme sports, that level of high achiever, but I do want to bring flow into my everyday life. And I think that's what Steve Steven Kotler did in his 30 years of research. He's basically brought all of that body of knowledge and found a way how to train normal people and corporate people and how to bring a flow state even in normal everyday kind of work.
Right, which is applied flow science, if you will.
Exactly. And so that's where we found that actually a lot of the techniques and the tools are still very
Yeah.
male
Hmm.
oriented, meaning it works really well for men.
Hmm.
So let's take a couple of examples.
Well, should we back up a little bit and talk about what is the flow cycle? What is flow? Or,
Sure. Yeah.
because I think that a lot of people don't know that it's a well-studied scientific field. And it begat, if you will, the study, and it begat, was it in the 50s?
Well, it really started like since the early 1900s, and it was called peak performance. Actually, I think peak performance, it was Abraham Maslow in the 70s who coined
Mm.
it. And then it was Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi who actually coined the term flow. But it's always been known as this, peak state. So I think for the first part of the century, it was known as a peak state, and it was always assumed that it only happened in athletes. It was only observed in athletes, and therefore it was mainly studied in athletes and people in extreme sports.
And what it feels like is when you lose track of time, you lose track of space, you lose track of your own identity, and you kind of lose your inhibition. You become one with the activity. So thinking of an extreme sport, if you're a skier or a surfer or a bicyclist, you are sort of above and beyond your human abilities, and you're flowing, and it almost feels like this flowing is not you, it's transcendental. And I've heard people talk about it like a spiritual experience.
Hmm. Very much so.
Yes. And so then from a scientific perspective, what they did is they said, well, there's actually 4 phases to it. And there's inputs and outputs as technology works, right? And if you can figure out what the inputs are and what happens in the middle, and then what the output is, then we can study it, right?
Right.
And so flow state is actually 4 distinct phases, and it consists of struggle, release, flow, is that what everybody talks about, and recovery.
Right.
And then there's parts, there's components that go into each one of them. So for example, in order to flow, your ability or your skill level needs to be roughly 4% above the challenge level, right? So
Right.
anything above that will create anxiety, anything below that will create boredom. And I think that is different for women. What creates anxiety is
Hmm.
different for
Hmm.
women, and what creates boredom is different for men and women. So that's one example. Um,
Right.
the other one
Yeah.
is focus, right? You absolutely have to maintain 100% laser-like focus in order to enter flow. And what brings focus to our activities, I think, is also different. Can you think of other things that might be different?
Yeah, so the flow cycle that you mentioned, so these are like, the universal flow concepts that we're talking about, that they are obviously common to both men and women because we're talking about the experience of flow. So as you said, the flow cycle has its 4 phases, which starts with the struggle. And, we've all experienced that, like in a game. In the beginning, you're kind of like struggling a little bit, just to get the hang of the game. And then when there's a moment where it clicks, you know that you understand the game or you make the right move, and then all of a sudden you're in this space of you're making
Ease
the
and
right
flow.
moves, and everything, yeah, it's happening naturally. So we've all experienced flow in different moments, and that, I think, that experience is the same for both men and women. And some of the examples where I found that it's a bit different for us how to get into flow. So I agree with you, like the nuances, right? So what is struggle, or how much tolerance we have for the challenge is different, because obviously the struggle phase is also the stress phase. So the
Hmm.
level of stress that, you know, the level of tolerance that women have for stress is different than the level of tolerance that men have for stress. Stress does different things to our bodies, and I think it drives men a little bit more towards results, whereas for women it creates more of a contraction. And for us, for example, we need more time and more space to allow, you know, our best to really come out. So I feel that when it comes to some of the tools that entering into flow that we use for entering into flow, like creating flow space, flow blocks in our calendar. So my calendar looks very different from Stephen Kotler's or Rian's, not only because they are, you know, very high achievers and they've been doing this for a long time, but also because men are very laser focused and they can do things in, you know, in that particular time. It helps them when, you know, they compress basically. Whereas I think for women, I find for myself and a lot of women that I talk to and my clients as well, that creates more stress for us. And actually, when we have more space, so if it's an hour meeting, I will make an hour and a half time in my calendar. And when I have an hour and a half time, I actually am more present in the meeting. I am more flowy. I feel more expanded. And then I allow more things to come through, or more intuition, more, um, yeah, more quality, I think, of everything that's already inside of me. But when I know that I only have 1 hour time and this meeting has to start at the hour and
Mm,
end at the hour, then as the hour is closing, is progressing, then I feel the pressure, and that stress just contracts me and makes me very, you know, trying to be on the mark. And I'm very, you know, I don't have that energy of I'm here. My
mhm,
energy starts to change towards, oh, I have to end the call now. So I have to
mhm,
think of things, how to smoothly end the conversation.
mhm,
So this is one very, very common example, I think, that applies to everybody and that we all feel,
mhm,
is the time variant. And another reason for this, actually, that I've heard, Alison Armstrong, she describes this. She's studied men for over 20 or 30 years, or maybe more, I think. And she's one of the leading coaches and psychologists, I think, as well, that she studied this difference in our physiognomy as well, that men, because they are testosterone dominant bodies, testosterone is very single focused. So when they need a very laser focused goal, and that's how they perform really well. And women, estrogen is more like a wall washer energy. And so we tend to notice a lot of things around us. Our awareness picks up so many things around us. So she says, she has an example. She's like, I know that when I need to lock my house, for example, to go on a vacation, you know, that I can do everything in 1 hour, but I will always give myself 2 hours. So this is something I learned from her. She's like, whatever you think you can do, give yourself the extra double the time, because that'll give you so much more ease and you will do that with so much more flow.
mm. I would actually have to try that because I end up, I'm just at a point in my life now in general where I don't like to be constrained. I have a lot of resistance to it. And instead of that
Mhm.
working, so within flow, one of the concepts is compression, time compression, which is what you talked
Mhm.
about. So instead of 2 hours, you give yourself less time, you give yourself 1 hour, which increases your productivity. And that's, we think, is the more male um, way to do it. I think that it could probably work if it's a really focused task and we
Mhm.
can be in the position of tuning out all distractions and tuning out all distractions for a time in this methodology. It's called a certainty window. So nothing changes
Mhm.
and you have
Mhm.
stable focused time for X amount of minutes. And
Mhm.
I think as a woman in general, or as a woman with children in the house and pets in the house, for me,
Mhm.
that window of certainty has been very difficult to secure. It's
Mm.
different than the Marines, right? Which is what
Yeah.
Stephen and Ruben talk about. It's different than when you're at war, which is a male concept, but it's my
Yeah.
house. So we are not, in general, we're not so rigid. It's my house. We are more laissez-faire and blase blah. And so when it becomes, this is the time for this, and this is the time for that, and we're just going on a mission, it's not the vibe in the house.
Yeah.
And I am the keeper of that vibe, right? Which is what we want. We want the collaborative, we want the soft, we want the inclusive, we want the space for communication and unplanned things to come up. So it creates a better balance overall, I think, to maybe not have the compressed focus and use that tool very, very precisely. Like when when the stakes are really high and you really need to spend your 1 hour really focused. But that time for me is very hard to secure as a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just made such a good point there. So well said. You know, we're not going to war. The house, the way we bring flow into our everyday lives, you know, in our families and in our homes, obviously changes and is quite different than how we bring it into our work. But still, the concepts of flow are the same, whether you're a Marine or whether you're a stay-at-home mom or, you
Right.
know, a working mom. In principle, flow works the same way. You can get into flow if you're doing something you absolutely love, you're absolutely, you know, focused and not distracted, and the challenge is high enough that it keeps you engaged, but not too high that it creates anxiety. And so this is some of like the top key criteria for entering flow, and you can get into flow even, you know, in any moment. And I think that it's wonderful to know this and to understand, because then you can bring flow into your space in different ways. Just like you said, like at home, it's, you know, we're not robots. We're not going to try to get things happen and, you know, make things happen all the time. We're just living, and we want to enjoy our time at home and have that space. So it makes perfect sense. And that just
And
brings me to,
and
yeah,
actually
go
just
ahead.
one more thing, right? So flow feels like play. And in that way, pets and children are collaborators because you can enter that state with them.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And that brings me to this concept that they talk a lot about in flow, and that's calendar surrender, or
Mhm.
once upon a time used to be coined calendar worship. And that's the idea that you create your calendar. And what I was attracted to that concept is that to me that means you design your life, and then bringing that into a life with a family and so many unpredictables, and have, you know, wanting to be available uh, for life's unpredictability. I think the challenge there was starting with your non-negotiables, and even in a space like with a family that you want to be available for everyone, you also want to be available at your best, and you
And
want
for
at your
yourself.
best, right, when you also honor your own time. And that concept of flow, I think, has really helped me uh, integrate it more into, rather than a rigid calendar where, you know, calendar boxing and all of it is very manly kind of ways of scheduling your day, where everything is filled and all your boxes are scheduled. Rather, it helped me, or how I adapted it to flow like a woman. I said, okay, what are my non-negotiables? Like, this is the time that I want to sleep. This is the time that I want to have my meals. This is the time that I want to work out. And then I share with my family, these are the things I want to do for my life that help me be a healthy and happy person. And so, you know, they support me in that. So in that sense, I think, and then also creating more space in my calendar. So when I look at somebody else's calendar, a man's calendar, it'll be like, because that's what they need. They need a lot more checking off
Structure.
to-dos, right? A lot more
Mhm.
structure maybe. And so I like structure, but then I allow that within my structure to have a lot more free space in it so I can roam in that space. But then I also feel achieved at the end of the day. I feel like I did my most important things, and that on some level is the way I adjust the concepts of flow, like calendar surrender, to making it a flow calendar for women, basically.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up also a good point. So part of the flow cycle is recovery. And this idea of showing up as your best self absolutely must have recovery. And I think that recovery is different for men and women. And what that means, also another part of that is how do you enter flow? You can't have anxiety. And part of managing this, overwhelm is different for men and women. So what do I mean by that? Within the concept of flow and the protocols of recovery, for example, if you do cold plunges, for a woman, in order for the cold plunge effects to be as effective, if you will, according to Stacy Sims, the temperature has to be warmer because of how our biology responds to the cold. We're always looking for safety, and we simply will not shake, which is to warm ourselves up. If it's too cold, we'll just shut down. So we won't get the same neurological
That,
or effect. That's one example. That's in the recovery protocol, and there are multiple ones like that. And then for the managing overwhelm and anxiety, so one example is we show up our best and ready for the activity. So for example, if you're a surfer, you have your sunblock and you have your bathing suit, and okay, that's maybe the same for men and women, but how we show up every day for life as a man and a woman, what this looks like is different, right? My hair is significantly longer than my husband's, and taking care of my hair requires a lot more money, a lot more planning, both daily and on a, weekly and monthly basis, which is not even part of his calendar planning.
yeah.
So that's one example. There are a lot of other grooming like things for women that we have to plan for. And every woman, of course, is different. But general woman to general man, right? They're going to be different considerations. Thinking about how to apply makeup, how to buy the makeup, how to test the makeup, not a concept my husband thinks about. And I'm not saying this because I am complaining. I love all these things. And they take time, which means time on my calendar. And what I try to do is I try to separate the planning time, the thinking through what it is that I need, with the execution time. So those
Yeah.
activities will be different. You still do the planning and the execution as a man and a woman, but what you think about and what you plan for, I think, will be different.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you just brought up a really good point here. This idea that planning and execution, there are two different parts of the brain who do that. And actually, this is a big piece in priming yourself for flow as well, is understanding that when your brain is in plan mode, it will not switch to execution mode. So you don't want to do those in the same day. Don't plan like 1 hour. I'm gonna strategize and plan, and then the next hour I'm going to execute it. And this, I think, is universal for both men and women. Like, this is just neurobiology, is how the brain turns on and off and operates. And I do completely agree. Then within that, the context of what
Mhm.
we plan and how we plan. And again, for me, the big piece is always coming to time. And another big piece that I found with time, as I'm implementing all of the flow concepts that have been so well studied, that we trained on, and this was like a boot camp almost for us, right? Like, all of us women we all had a bit more of a struggle than men did when we did those first 3 months of real boot camp training. And yeah, and one big piece about time as well that came up for me as a woman was, and this is actually not just for a woman, but I think for women probably it's even more, or it works even better, is this concept of essentialism, or this concept of like focusing on your biggest task or your biggest goal,
Mhm.
and do
Mhm.
that. So instead of trying to overdo yourself and plan your day with three big things, like, I'm going to complete this three big projects presentations today, Rather focus on the one, like what is the one thing that would move the needle today? And then just do that. And when I slowly started to do that, because it was hard in the beginning, I was so used and programmed to like, but no, but I have to do all of these things. And because I think that's how we were trained in the corporate world. In the corporate world, there's always this so many things to do, so many big goals, and then you're trying to keep up. And there's always this sense that as a woman, you kind of had to prove yourself a little bit more in order to be considered up to par.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least I think a lot of us women probably, feel this way, even though we don't express it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to make an effort to train my brain to say, no, I'm not going to do three things today. I'm going to do one thing and I'm going to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I gave myself like 3 hours, and this is the one thing I'm going to do today, honestly, I did so much better with that one thing. And I just felt so much more spacious and so much more balanced. So for me, time, adjusting time to flow like a woman has been probably one of the fundamental pieces.
That is so important. I think another piece is, as women, we take responsibility for, I do this, right? I mentioned it before. I take responsibility for other people and their lives in my life. So it's my responsibility to schedule and execute my daughter's doctor's appointments and hair appointments and back to school. And I take lots of pleasure in that, right? I want that to be my role, but there's less control in it than just my own. And the same, for the dog, for example. And I don't mean to diminish Lenny, my husband. He participates in the household, but we have primary focus, and his is primary work, and mine is primary home. So I think for many women that's the case, which makes it much more difficult to have that calendar surrender and to focus, to take the focus from outside and put it on yourself and take the time for understanding what's important to you and planning for it, putting it on the calendar. And then what you mentioned, which is communication with the householders, right? To say it's going to change. And I think at work, men encounter this too. If you're changing from always being available and always responding to things on email and on Slack and whatever, and you're now saying this is the communication channel and these are the communication windows that we're going to do this in, there's an adjustment period. But I think, within work and within home, and for a woman, if you're combining the two, the challenges might be a little bit more difficult. And for me personally, it's more like I feel like I'm failing people emotionally if I'm not nurturing or taking care of them.
Yeah, that's a big piece, and that will definitely affect your level of flow or how much flow you can enter during the day. But without fail, the fundamental concept of making time, block a flow block, making flow blocks in your day for whatever it is, whether it's about your project at work or something that you want to do at home, that still like remains fundamental. But within that, there's the nuances of women versus men that are so different, I think,
For
in
me,
many ways.
that whole scheduling communication or batching communication has been very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. And it makes things clearer even with my householders, right? To say, I'm not available all the time, but I am available between 11 and 12. It's not perfect. And it's been a training time, right? Because if my daughter forgot her iPad and she's now at school and she needs somebody to bring it to her, I will do it.
Right.
But and not my husband. But it's also good for her to have, well, these are going to be the consequences if I forget my iPad kind of thing. So it's a good mechanism for getting everybody really to communicate better and to not be in communication and available 24/7, but to have windows, which makes us all more effective and efficient. And what you mentioned, which is like task switching or focus switching. For flow, you need focus. So if you're communicating for 60 minutes, you're going to be a better communicator. Even if you don't enter flow, you're going to get closer to being, more effective and efficient.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
men or
So
women, I think.
right. So we brought some interesting concepts in here, and I just want to kind of like recap just a few of those that I think are really key here. And one is the communication badging that you mentioned. I think that's a very helpful tool, and it probably looks the same for men and women because fundamentally what you're doing is you're setting the times that you're going to communicate, whether that's the emails or the phones, but those are particular times in the day, and you're not constantly being yanked like a yo-yo to go and respond to this, and basically, which is not responding, you're on a reactive mode. So if during the day you're constantly communicating about everything, then there is no space for you to actually enter flow and do anything really productive. So communication badging is very much connected with the flow block, creating that 90 to 120 minute, which is actually known to be, it's been studied in the human biology, that is the ultradian rhythm, I believe is the term for it. We have so many rhythms, but the 90-minute is called the ultradian rhythm, where the body after 90 minutes experiences a bit of a dip in energy. So it's like a wave, like your energy can go up, your attention, your focus, everything. And then in 90 minutes,
Mm.
it starts to dip, and it can go up to 120 minutes. And the principle is that you want to set up 90 minutes to 120 minutes of flow blocks. And you don't want to interrupt that flow, that flow block. But within that flow block, there will be the flow cycle, which you mentioned right in the beginning of this talk, which is also a very important framework to understand for how the flow cycle works. So just wanted to kind of sum all of these key concepts that we brought into the conversation that were very interesting.
And we'd be amiss not to talk about cycles when we're talking about women and flow.
For sure, since we just mentioned cycles, right? And we
Yes.
are on the last 5 minutes of our call. I think that this is a wonderful like point to kind of end the conversation with is women's body when they are in the cycle age and post-cycle age. So, perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal. So maybe you can speak a little bit to that, and I can give my 2 cents to that as well.
Yes. So the idea is that men and women have different rhythms and different cycles. Men are much more about 24-hour cycle. I don't know what it's called. And women have a, 29 to 30-day cycle that's biological to us and has everything to do with our energy level, and our energy level dictates our focus, and then it dictates our recovery protocols. And so for a woman who is still in the cycling phase, not every day, having every day be the same probably won't work. And Iris, maybe you can talk about that. But for me, since I am in the postmenopausal era, it actually works really well. I'm on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and my days are maybe more like for the guys, right? Like it works very well to have the same structure, and I no longer feel that monthly cycle and the changes that I used to feel. So I don't know if all postmenopausal women are like that, but that's my experience. What is it like for you, and what should we, if we're not where I'm at, keep our minds on?
Yeah, I believe that for women before, women who are still in the cycle age, uh, there's this concept called cycle syncing. And one of the key people who have been working on the cycle syncing, flow cycle syncing concept is Alisa Vitti, who is a biologist and also works a lot with women. And she discovered that basically in our 28-day, it's basically 28, 29-day plus minus, which is called our infradian rhythm. And our
Radiant.
24-hour chrono time is actually called the circadian rhythm. So we all have the 24-hour circadian rhythm in our bodies. We all run with the sun, but for us women, the 28-day cycle, it's literally changing our biology to 4 specific weeks in 4 specific ways, which means our fundamental systems of the body, like our brain, our metabolism, our digestive system, what else? Our endocrine system, which are our hormones, are doing different things each week. So in the 4 weeks of our cycle, our bodies are experiencing different things. In ovulation, we are very communicative. Our brain is firing up all the neurons, so that's we're best at being eloquent and articulate. And in the other side of the cycle, when we're menstruating, then we're very internal. Our bodies are doing it's like hibernation in the body. So the brain is doing different things, is not very communicative. So it's a little bit harder for us to say the things that we want to say, or how we want to say it. So this concept works very well for women to get into flow when your body's primed for flow. And this ties back into Stephen's Kotler mantra: get your biology to work for you. And that's
Yes.
why he has been focused in studying the neuroscience of flow as a way to understand what the body is doing, and let's prime the body so we can get into flow when the body is ready for flow. And for women who are in the cycle, this would be, I think, a key piece. It has been a key piece for me ever since I started cycle syncing. I can understand. I flow a lot better because I know when is my flow day, my flow week. And alongside all of these other tools, it has been quite a nice,
So
fitting
you
and
will look
matching.
at your month, for example, if
Hmm.
I'm understanding you correctly, and say, this is the week to do more talking and being out in public and being more visible and caring about, what I look like out there, versus this is the week to schedule flow around thinking and being off camera
Yeah,
and being more creative and creating your visuals for your social media, for example.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like ovulation week is the week that you want to set up all of your meetings, have your hardest conversations, and do all of your negotiations. It's it's the time to be social, to go out and do all your communicative social activities. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is the time where you want to do your inner work, your the analysis of everything, like all the projects that you started. That's not a time to start projects. It's not a time to execute projects. That's a time to actually reflect on all the work that has been done in the past few weeks. So understanding that your body is completely primed for different things actually can totally optimize. And because women have this 4 different states, we are so much more dynamic and so much more diverse that we can handle more things. Whereas men are very good at doing the one thing that they set their minds to, because they're very single focused, and they're very repetitive in their 24-hour circadian rhythm. Every day, if they do the same thing, they'll just become like absolutely the best at it. But they're just very good at this 5 things, for example, that they will do
Yeah.
every day. Whereas women, they have this extra layers of ability to adjust.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's the other
Beautiful.
key piece for me when we're talking about flowing like a woman. So if there would be like the top 1 thing or 3 things that you would want to leave this conversation with when you think of flowing like a woman, what are the things that pop out to you in this experience thus far?
Mm. Well, I think that separating planning from doing and considering the whole month, right, and the phases for most women, I think that's one thing that really stood out to me. Um, I think that when we talk about our biology, even though we have the same, hormones and the same chemicals, I think the amount of chemicals and when they get released and what is the trigger for it is different. And I think that it's important for us to pay attention to our nutrition and the timing of our nutrition. And, so just even though our biology fundamentally is the same, there's enough nuance in there to where, like Stacy says, women are not just small men. And so knowing and understanding what optimizes our specific biology and the timing of it is important. And there is a difference between pre and postmenopausal. So paying more attention to that.
Yeah.
And I think the other one is, we didn't really talk about it too much, but like what triggers flow is what excites us, right? The autotelic, the given things that are interesting to us. And I think that those are different for men and women. I think that if we, pay attention to men talk about going to war and, winning, and, if you just listen to the words, what is interesting and exciting to men overall is different than what is interesting, right? We talk about collaboration and harmony and creating an environment. And so highest level, what about you?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more with all those points. For sure, what we're passionate about, I guess what turns men on and what turns women on can be different to some degree. Like, what does it for men is go hunting and build fortresses. For us is, grow, farm, expand, wash in rivers and make love. And so that could be one fundamental
Make love,
difference in
not
how.
war.
Make love, not war. Exactly. That could be one fundamental difference of how we flow a bit differently. But I would say at the top of the list for me, that jumped to me, I've really made a difference in how I adjust flowing like a woman, would absolutely be the way I use time. I would give myself a lot more time now than I ever did before. And that just makes me flow better. It makes me do what I'm doing with a lot more intention, with a lot more space, a lot more creativity. And so I'm not just performing and functioning and, like popping out cookies like I'm in a factory. I actually feel like, I'm allowing whatever is there to just come through. And for that, we need a lot more space. So space is definitely at the top of it. And thank you for your comments. I see one of my old friends is sending us some hands up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. And yeah, timing would definitely be on top of it. And I couldn't agree more with the biology. I think it starts with the biology for sure. Biology, there's a school of thought that says biology trumps psychology. There's a lot
Yes.
of arguments around that, but I do think that ultimately our biology is probably big enough that if you don't honor it, psychology will not be able to do the work for you. So your biology as a woman is quite different. And also before menopausal, if you are in the cycle, that will be a huge difference in how you flow in your cycle and how you flow in your ovulation. So knowing how your body works, I think is the two big stones, your biology and your timing. And there's so many other more, but in this short 45-minute talk, we wanted to just bring like the top key pieces of how to flow like a woman and how to bring flow into
Yes.
your everyday life and your work.
Yes. And between the two of us, we could talk about this forever. So reach out. We'll just love to chat with you too. Tell
Yeah,
us what challenges you might be facing in your life, and that'll help us understand women in our lives more as well.
yeah, absolutely. Mila, lovely talking with you as always.